So let's get into some of my scrape setups and how I utilize them and how I go about or a strategy around each one of them. So the first one that I've got is, or one of the ones I'm kind of most interested in currently is on the private piece I hunt. Essentially this one is right in a travel corridor. Basically it's at the edge of some very thick, deep cover where a lot of the deer are either bedding or feel very comfortable moving around in that thicker cover. And it's on the edge between that thick cover and a patch of mature maples that's, basically got a big canopy, but just more or less open hardwoods. And then, not far from there is the open field of the main, I guess the big main field of the property, where it's basically like 50 acres of open field. And again, there is some corn planted in there currently. So I imagine there's going to be some draw or movement of deer moving, from the cover to the corn. So essentially what this is a basic kind of like a Y shape of a couple different trails where there's two trails coming out of the cover and the unit, come to one, or, basically come to an intersection of one trail. And I've basically put this scrape right at that intersection where basically the three, points of that trail all meet together. So, and with this, with this intersection of these trails, is next to a smaller maple that doesn't necessarily have or didn't have any good branches within reach of the deer. So what I did was took a freshly cut branch and essentially tied it with some 550 cord to the trunk of the tree. Again, hanging it essentially, somewhere between, 4 to 4.5 feet high. Basically you're just kind of looking at, whether or not the deer can reach it or not. Essentially somewhere around head level for them. So tied that branch up, basically having the end of that branch overhanging the dirt spot that I cut out or dug up a little bit. This one, because of it being in the thicker cover, I did feel more comfortable with increasing the size of that scrape. Basically, as the deer are walking, they will notice, that this is a big open area of just freshly turned dirt. And again, with this scrape being right in the middle of the trail, any deer that is utilizing those trails either has to, directly walk into the dirt patch of the scrape itself, or they're going to have to either, move their head around or basically avoid the licking branch if they want to go through it without leaving any scent. But more often than not, there's just something about having that branch right at head level where they almost can't help themselves. They're going to play around with that branch, rub their faces in it and check the scent that from any deer that had already used it. And again, with this spot too, in regards to the location, I actually do have a bow stand that is within 25 yards of that scrape. Again, utilizing the location of being just a naturally good movement area for the deer. And then by having that scrape there, having that additional draw and having that something that the deer will focus on, they'll potentially stop in that location and present a good shot. So the next one, again, is going to be in a travel corridor. It's essentially on the other side of the property, still basically in one corner of the big field. Essentially what this is basically an inside corner. So where the corner of the field is, it's right on that corner. So deer will, naturally, follow that inside corner. And this is actually, there's a little bit of a slope down from the main field. So the deer can actually walk through there without actually being at the level of the field itself. So they can kind of skirt around the edge of the field and feel really secure being down in the cover and at a lower elevation. So again, another one where I've set up my deer stand, on the field edge, and I can actually shoot into that inside corner, inside the cover. And that's where I set up the scrape as well. Again, same thing, kind of where that trail is already there naturally. That's where I built that in. Again, same thing. I didn't have a good overhead licking branch. So essentially what I did was ran a strand of 550 cord between two trees essentially, and then hung a piece of grapevine down from that rope down into overhead the scrape. Again, same thing. That grapevine is probably somewhere between 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick, so it has some little bit of weight to it. It's going to give those deer a little bit of resistance, and I wanted to make sure that it was a free floating and not tied up real tight. Whereas basically just going to give them too much resistance. It's not going to move around as they try to bop it around or hit it with their faces, or as the buck is moving around with their antlers. It needs to be free flowing a little bit, to kind of give it a little bit more realistic action. And again with this one too, I think I started this one out with some of that Conquest scent. This is one I did put some of the EverCalm on the branch itself. Again, the big thing I noticed was that the does and fawns utilized it first, and then as it got into the pre-rut and rut, that's when the bucks really started to become active, and they were hitting it basically early morning, and then in the evening, and then especially during the nighttime, as they were cruising at night, I would get a lot of pictures of them at night as well. Again, same thing, put a camera on it to be able to take inventory and document that movement. And then also, again, still having it within a bull range during hunting season itself.